Alright, hello again. Today I have another match coverage video for a match played in the Kaijudo Open that I was hosting on the Rangers Dojo Discord group. This match played between Darksigner on the left from the German Dual Masters channel, if anyone's familiar with that. He's playing Water Fire Nature, I guess Water Nature, Splashing Fire for Swift Regeneration stuff. Basically a corrupted sort of veggie deck as well, mixing those two strategies. Just trying to be an aggressive deck that kind of curves out into Finbar and then uses a ton of attacking triggers off Finbar, Bad Apple, and Seneschal to gain a bunch of advantage, and then uses Swift Regeneration as a powerful top-end finisher. And of course these fire cards, Blitz Commando and Steam Tank, are being used as powerful things to bring out with the regeneration. So you can set up plays like Steam Tank plus Durian to keep you alive, and also on top of that, just put on a ton of pressure with like a Blitz Commando and a bunch of 2-drops that can be a pretty powerful top-end card. And then just the effect that protects your stuff from being banished is hugely relevant as well. So that is Darksigner's deck. On the right, we have Andross playing his light-dark mid-range deck that we've featured a few times as well. Of course, he's got some really relevant cards in this matchup. The discard being able to interrupt the curves of Darksigner are hugely important, because Darksigner's deck is one that really hinges on a Bad Apple or a Finbar or a regeneration, and if you can pick those off with discard, that's pretty relevant. Also, if you can maybe even snipe a fire card. I mean, usually the fire cards just get charged early on in the game, so it's not that likely, but sometimes sniping those can really hurt the ceiling of Darksigner's deck. If he can't find a fire card, his regenerations are a lot less powerful. But yeah, so the discards are important, of course. And then on top of that, Vang is really powerful in this matchup, giving him an actual out to things like regeneration. For a bunch of different decks, especially if you were playing a light dark deck that didn't have access to Vang, there's just not many cards. I mean, you could play stuff like Absolute Darkness, but that card's hugely expensive, and you have to really build to support and ramp up to get there for matchups like this. But for the most part, like Sumo Artichoke or a Durian that's protected by Swift Regeneration just makes it really hard for you to die. But if your opponent's playing stuff like Rusalka, Finbar, or Piercing, or in this case stuff like Vang, they can interrupt those defensive setups, which can be quite annoying. So Vang just being able to, on top of that, just pick off all the weenie creatures that Darksigner has. Like, he's filled with 1,000 power creatures. He's got a bunch of, like, even his good stuff like Seneschal and Bad Apple, those are 3,000 power creatures. So the fact that all of Darksigner's creatures are very understated just makes Vang look really, really appealing in this matchup. Some of the top end stuff that Andross has, like the Agarics, don't look at their best here. Serpent's also a bit slow, but I guess it can be a line of defense as well, just letting you make maybe a few trades here or there, or if your opponent does Swift Regeneration, if you don't have the answer, you can still trade in a few guys to, like, maybe a tapped Artichoke or a tapped, I don't know, Finbar or Seneschal. Like, you could trade in a couple of your own dudes just to sacrifice them for shields maybe, but for the most part, Serpents feels a little bit slow, Agarics feels a bit slow. I think a lot of the time, like, Andross is just going to be looking to build up a board. Lost Patrol and Keeper of Laws, even though Keeper of Laws is just very good at being, like, resilient to a lot of the shield, like basically all the shield blasts that Darksigner's playing don't really affect Keeper of Laws too much. And on top of that, like, Keeper is just 500 power bigger than, like, pretty much everything he has. Like, Finbar and Steam Tank are of course bigger, but those are a lot more expensive than the Keeper. So Keeper just being bigger than all of Darksigner's early stuff and hexproof makes it really hard to get off the board and attack profitably through it. Lost Patrol also just incredibly huge, beats over everything in Darksigner's deck. So just like Keeper of Laws, Lost Patrol, just building up a board of those kinds of cards to, like, counterplay whatever play. Like, it basically forces Darksigner into that position where he kind of has to make his Bad Apple plays to get up to a Regeneration or a Finbar or something like that. But if you have that Keeper of Laws, Lost Patrol setup, you can just revenge kill whatever Darksigner has to attack with, hurt his board presence, and then you can also use that board position to quickly turn the corner once you land these 6 drops. So I don't think we're going to be seeing too much Agarics or Serpents. I think it's mostly just going to be pick apart what Darksigner's doing, either by mitigating it through stuff like Lost Patrol, Keeper of Laws, or Mesmerize to pick off, and Spire Puppet to pick off crucial cards, and then quickly turn the corner with just Vangs and Lyras, and that should be enough. And Stormspark can bail you out of some spots if you are facing down like a scary regeneration. And then, yeah, I guess Darksigner is really just going to be looking for those key cards. Logo Scan to dig for his more powerful cards. Finbar, super crucial. Swift Regeneration and Bad Apple, super crucial. The Seneschal plan doesn't seem too good in this matchup. It just dies so easily to Vang. You're kind of forced into it. Like these go wide and then push and just replace. Seneschal just lets you convert some of your early creatures to pressure and still draw cards. And ideally you have like a Renegade so that you still maintain that mana advantage somehow. It's just like a much slower version of Bad Apple, but it at least gives you extra cards, lets you keep going wide and spitting out creatures. But it just feels like that plan's just, it's a pretty underpowered plan, I find, a lot of the time, and it just is going to get so easily countered by Vang. So we'll see how that plays out in this match, but I guess that should be enough rambling. I think overall, I think the addition of Vang really changes this kind of matchup. I felt like a lot of configurations of Light Dark could be underpowered in these matchups, or not able to keep containing these decks. But at the same time, I think Darksigner lowering his ceiling by cutting all the veggie stuff, and on top of that, Andross getting a huge tool in this Vang for this kind of matchup, I think it swings the Light Dark matchup into, or the matchup into the favor of Light Dark. All right, so we are here for game one. Looks like Darksigner won the die roll, chose to go first, or leads on the Artichoke. Interesting opening hand. Doesn't have any early creatures, but he's got the regeneration to play towards. He's got Logo Scan to potentially dig. At the same time, you don't really want to charge the Seneschal to play the Logo Scan, maybe not. Like, you'd kind of want to hold that, but at the same time, maybe you have to. But if he misses, like if he draws something like Renegade, he could potentially play that and charge the Logos, or play the Renegade by charging the Seneschal. But yeah, now he draws Finbar instead. Interesting. I feel like I would charge the you could charge either the Root Trap or the Seneschal here. The Seneschal because you want to unlock water, but you could also wait another turn to maybe draw like a Trickster and charge that instead and play the Logo Scan, and then you can at least have like a more powerful turn 4 play, which seems like what Darksigner's going for. No rush to charge the water, and Root Trap, the first Root Trap's not the most important card, so I think I like that from Darksigner. I guess on Andross' side, he's opened like a few Storm Sparks, not really what you want to see. The Trox can be okay at sometimes, like it can kind of clear some crucial stuff that the opponent has. So that card's nice, but also pretty slow. And then he's got the Lost Patrol, Keeper of Laws that I kind of talked about earlier. Like that's a good setup for him. So Darksigner now misses like a better water charge, so just goes for the Logos by charging the Seneschal, which I agree with. I think Finbar's just too powerful. Like, even though Seneschal kind of guarantees you the turn 4 follow-up, I think Finbar's just too much more important than the Seneschal. Even though they're kind of similar effects, I think it just, like, the Finbar being able to bounce like a Lost Patrol, the Finbar being able to like just draw off everything, right? If you build up your board with a few veggies, and I also like Seneschal just dying to Vangs. Like I don't know. I feel like just Finbar is just more powerful, and he kind of just draws the Seneschal anyway, so not the biggest deal. Here, interesting thought between, you probably want to play the Seneschal this turn, so it's like, do you charge a Trickster, which is like a potential follow-up play to the Seneschal to just go wide, or do you charge one of the redundant Tendril Grasps? And Tendril Grasp, the thing is, like, Tendril is kind of looking, I guess it, Yeah, because if you just make the plan of like just playing Trickster next turn and then you want to Tendril the turn after that, your Trickster's just going to mana anyways, and it kind of ramps you in that sense, which is actually not the worst, right? Because then you can just play the Swift Regeneration a turn ahead. So you're essentially keeping the Trickster as like you're basically playing the Trickster as a sprout on your following turn. Because you can just follow up with the Tendril, clear 2 of Andross's guys, put yourself to 7 mana, and then you can untap Regen. But the thing is, the Regen is just like not looking very strong here, so there's no real reason to rush towards it. And I think keeping both Tendrils, it makes it more likely that if you really plan on landing these Tendril Grasps at some point, and you want to connect with these, you want to kill these Slayers, you want to just make sure that you have access to one if you want to be able to cast it. I think keeping both helps you to make sure that you can resolve one through discard, because like Andross could easily have like a puppet here and just pick off the Tendril. And if you think Tendril is powerful enough, like keeping 2 copies just, yeah, it makes it like a top deck Mesmerize stealing. I mean, the thing is that a top deck Mesmerize is probably not going to take the Tendril anyways. So maybe that's not the biggest concern, but it does insulate you against Spire Puppet at the very least. And yeah, it just takes away the option to potentially make that like play Trickster into Tendril Grasp the following turn play. But again, I don't think there's like a rush to resolve this regeneration when you look at just, there's not like, it doesn't seem likely that his mana zone is going to shake up to a point where you want that regen. But at the same time, I mean, it gives you an extra body. Like Trickster gives you an extra body into Finbar, but again, like the thing at the same time is for the Finbar to really have a bunch of value against Andross, even with the Trickster in play, you probably need to get rid of some of these creatures before it. Otherwise, you're just going to be like losing your Seneschal, but maybe you don't even care. You can just bounce the Lost Patrol, and Trickster trading for Seneschal is not the biggest deal. So I could still see an argument for, or Trickster trade, not Trickster, Lurking Skullcutter. But then you also assume that you just kind of assume that Andross is going to play another creature, and then you're probably going to, so you maybe want to just like resolve Tendril Grasp and then bounce the lone creature. Like, I don't know, it feels like kind of a sticky situation to push these creatures through regardless, and getting that extra creature for an extra draw Finbar could be relevant. But the other consideration too is if you charge Tendril, play Trickster next turn, for example. I mean, for one, you could just draw a card that you want to play over Trickster anyways next turn, like a Bad Apple or another Seneschal or something like that. And on top of that, like, reducing your hand size makes it more likely that a potential Spire Puppet or something would snipe one of these more relevant cards, like the Finbar or Swift Regen. So I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what the reasoning Darksigner has for this play, but I mean, it just makes sense. Like, I guess intuitively on one hand, it just makes sense to like diversify your options by charging the redundant card, but at the same time, like, it's a probably more powerful card than these Tricksters, so it makes sense to want to hold. Like, yeah, I don't think there's, like, that's the thing is, I don't know if it's going to be relevant that you want to play multiple copies of Tendril Grasp this game, but which is why it feels weird to hold redundant copies. But I laid out a bunch of reasons why, I guess, why you would think about that stuff. And it makes sense to keep both. And yeah, Andross just caps off his curve with the Keeper of Laws, which just makes it really hard to interact now, and it makes Tendril Grasp a lot less appealing. So now, so this kind of played out similarly anyways. Like, Darksigner just charged in a different order. I guess that at this point, it just takes away an option. Like, he could have played 2 creatures out. Like, he could have gone Trickster plus Renegade if he had held the Trickster, but then he has to charge maybe his second copy or a Finbar, and at that point you're talking about, like, is Trickster, like, it would probably have been the same if he charged the first Tendril Grasp last turn, he probably would have opted to just hold all 4 of these powerful cards and just charge the Trickster rather than get it into play. Especially because, again, if you're Tendril Grasping, you're just putting your own creatures into the mana zone anyways. So it's not the biggest deal if you want to resolve the Tendril. And then but I guess like playing the Trickster, keeping the Trickster and charging the second Tendril means you're completely off the Tendril plan. And then you're wanting to make Finbar look better, so yeah. I guess that's the thing. Like, that's kind of the idea behind charging the redundant Tendril first, is it just gives you more options on this turn. Because he could have looked at his hand and said, you know what, I am off the Tendril plan, and then just played the second Trickster out, and then gone for like a Finbar next turn. But because he charged Trickster last turn, he kind of had no choice. He was basically like, okay, now that's basically the difference. So it's kind of like, do you want to give yourself more options for the follow-up turns, or do you want to kind of commit to a sort of idea about how your cards are going to be? And I don't know. I think it ultimately maybe amounted to the same thing either way, but just some interesting meta decisions. And for Andross, draws a second keeper, which is actually... I mean, it makes those Tendrils look even worse. It makes the Finbars really hard to line up profitably. It makes even any Shield Blast, like even a Shield Blast to get rid of this problematic big Lost Patrol, just doesn't do anything. So that is a pretty powerful draw. I think I like playing it, but the question, I think you want to charge one of these 2 cards, right? Because you want to be putting yourself up to the ability to play a 6-drop next turn if you draw it. And the question is, like, do you want to charge Gloom or do you want to charge Mez? And Gloom is a card that does play in a Tendril Grasp. You are insulated from Tendril to an extent because you have the double laws, so him, like Darksigner, trying to manage your board with Tendril is really ineffectual against double laws because they give you a bunch of mana and a bunch of cards, which is like the worst case, because then... like one of the if you're dead on cards, then you're giving your opponent, if your opponent's dead on cards, then giving them a bunch of extra mana via a Tendril Grasp isn't the worst thing in the world, because they're not going to be using all that extra mana anyways. But if you're giving them mana and cards, it's not a good recipe, because then they can just spend all that mana immediately on the cards they drew. But keeping Mesmerize as an interaction to pick apart those like regenerations for late game, which is probably one of the ways you're gonna, maybe if somehow you lose this game, is probably gonna be on the back of some regenerations. So being able to keep the Mesmerize to kind of just force yourself through on the following turn sort of makes sense. At the same time, there's arguments to just like play the extra creature. Because there's so many cards in Darksigner's hand, mezzing one might not be the biggest deal, but again, like when you're against a regeneration deck, mezzing one card can be the big deal, because if they only have 1 regeneration, then that kind of trumps their whole strategy. So I could see that being correct for sure. Especially because Gloom, well, never mind. I was going to say Gloom can't pressure through like a Shield Artichoke, but you can always just attack with it first, so it's kind of an irrelevant point. So yeah, Darksigner really up against it. Like, a bunch of creatures he just can't deal with. Interesting, I didn't comment on that. Interesting that Andross didn't poke with the Skull Cutter. I'm not sure how I feel about that. Like, obviously, the problem with poking with the Skull Cutter is that it just, like, it obviously just gives... like this way, there's basically no attacks that Darksigner can make, whereas if you attack with the Skull Cutter, it gives him an attack that he can make. But I don't know. I feel like poking the 1 shield can help, just like specifically against Tendril Grasp, right? Because if you don't poke that shield, then your opponent your opponent playing Tendril Grasp stops your lethal setup, because like even though, like we've covered, the Tendril Grasp really isn't too profitable for Darksigner, it's still a way that he stops himself from dying, because you didn't convert that Skull Cutter. Whereas if you poke with the Skull Cutter, then the Tendril Grasp is only effectively trading 1 for 1, or it only protects the 1 shield, because you already broke 1, and then the Tendril Grasp clears both creatures, but like they could have just cleared the Skull Cutter, so it's only clearing the... I don't know, The thing is, it lets your opponent play Finbar instead of Tendril Grass, but they're still down a shield. Like they can go. I don't know. It just feels like it makes it more likely that you have lethal, because now, like I said, like a Tendril Grasp now just gets rid of 2 of your dudes, and then you're facing 2 shields, and it gives. And the problem with that too is it can be potentially scary, just because a Tendril Grasp also puts Darksigner up to 8 mana on his following turn for a regeneration. Now it's going to be really hard for him to actually leverage that to good effect, because he's not going to be able to like steam tank. Like he's so far away from steam tank Durian, and it's very unlikely that he can actually do that. So like you're so unlikely to lose anyways, so I can get not poking and then not just giving the profitable attack, making Finbar a little bit worse, and then next turn you can just go with the Skullcutter double keeper. But yeah, I think it does kind of play into the Tendril Grasp, because it basically takes away Andross's ability to go for lethal next turn, which is definitely relevant, because again, if he just pokes for that shield, the Tendril Grasp is no longer a 2-for-1 removal spell, or not 2-for-1 in card advantage, like a kill 2 creatures, because obviously it's like a minus 4 or something, I don't know. But yeah, it's like it goes from a 2-for-1 removal to a 1-for-1 removal, because you can kill the Skullcutter anyways, and then yeah. Basically my thoughts. Like it basically means like no matter what Darksigner does, you're always going to be able to push for lethal next turn if you attack with that Skullcutter. But I can understand the reason for not wanting to do it. So Darksigner here. Oh, he just had to take a break there. So he draws return. Finds a pineapple. And now this turn charges it and goes for Regen. Yeah, yes. This is unfortunate. Yeah. If only you could attack first in this game. Because if you could attack first, like you could get yourself to 8 mana, so that you could potentially find the cards to charge Cryon and then Swift Regeneration out Cryon Durian if you can find all that stuff. But on 8 mana, there's like no way that you can Cryon Durian anymore. So yeah, I don't know. How would Darksigner get out of this? He would need Artichoke and Shields. Like, yeah, I mean, because of not poking with a Skullcutter, he's not going to die this turn, but it's really hard for him to not die the next turn, because he just can't bounce these. These are basically like almost invincible, which is kind of insane. And then, so he needs like literally, yeah, he just needs Artichoke out of Shields to present an indestructible defender. Because there's no way he can set up regeneration for an indestructible defender without to stay alive. His only way to basically stay alive through keepers is like an indestructible Durian or Artichoke, and the only way he can set that up, given that he's on 7 mana right now, and also hasn't seen a Durian or Steam Tank yet, his only way to set that up is to have an Artichoke out of Shields. So Andross plays the Mesmerize and sees like a pretty redundant hand with like the Bad Apple, Swift, and double Finbar. And I think you should take one of those Swifts, because I think like the only way that the Darksigner is winning this game is like I was saying, like if he can get out that indestructible Artichoke, he needs to be able to Swift to protect it the next turn, and then even then the only way he's gonna be able to win this game is chaining Swift Regenerations, because just playing a Swift to protect the first Artichoke and get out a couple creatures, he's not gonna be able to convert that into a wind, even if like even if he's able to survive. Because if he is going for that, like, it's so unlikely that he can even come back from this spot, right? Because he needs, like, again, he needs Artichoke. He needs to make it indestructible with the regeneration, build up play out of maybe another creature or something. And then he needs to dodge, like, off of draw steps and the Keeper of Laws triggers. If he'll be at 0 shields, most likely. Yeah, because he can't use the sumo to protect an attack, because then he just loses access to the sumo for the regen. So he has to go down to 0 shields, which means at any point a Vang just wins the game because it just clears the Artichoke even though it's protected by regen. So he's got to fade Vang the whole game. And then, yeah, but on top of that, he needs to chain these regens, because one turn of that Artichoke protection isn't going to do it, because he just builds up a board of maybe 4 creatures or something like that, and then that's not going to beat 5 shields. So he's going to need back-to-back regenerations to potentially have a chance to win, if not even more than that, right? He's going to need back-to-back regenerations to have a chance. So I think, given that that's like the case, given that that's like pretty much the only way it looks like that Darksigner can even have a chance this game, I think you definitely have to take one of the regenerations with this Mesmerize. Because the Finbars, they don't really do anything to prevent these Keeper of Laws from winning the game. The Bad Apple is just like a multi-civ charge. Like, it's not really doing anything here. I think the regens, like I said, the only way that Darksigner really has a chance of winning this game is chaining those together and dodging Vang, basically, and having a Sumo Artichoke and shields, which is a lot to ask for. So, okay, yeah, I feel like that doesn't make too much sense. And goes for 1 creature. Yeah, you could go for 2. I guess it doesn't matter. Like, if you're worried about, like, Yeah, I guess it doesn't matter too much, because if you're worried about, again, like, one of the only ways you're going to lose this game is if that Artichoke is in shields. And if you just, like, pass here and wait for a big board by just playing the Skullcutter to give you 3 attacks next turn through a Finbar or something, or maybe even, like, your opponent, like, yeah, it's kind of the same thing anyways, and then if your opponent plays Finbar, you're in the same spot. And then on top of that, like, if your opponent just plays Regen and they have the Artichoke and shields, then that kind of stops you anyways. So, yeah, it just doesn't make a huge difference. The Grudge Weaver is just a line of defense, I guess. So I don't think that matters too much either way. And, like, waiting here also doesn't make too much sense, because, like, then Darksigner can either just buy a turn to find, like, those Cryon Steam, like the Cryon Durian stuff. If he just plays a Finbar, bounces this, you're kind of just spinning your wheels in the same position. So that doesn't feel too great if just waiting. So I think, yeah, you probably just go for the attack. But you could play 2 creatures to force maybe the regeneration defensively. But again, like, that's not even good, because you'd rather force it out now. And if he does have the sumo, he has to play it, and then you can just top deck Vang, right? Because otherwise, like, it gets sticky, because then you just pass, he plays a regeneration, and then you play Vang on your turn if you somehow, like, if you draw it, and then it doesn't actually out the Sumo Artichoke to kill him that turn, and it just gets weird. So I don't know. This makes sense, and Darksigner does have, and he finds a 3rd regeneration too, which is actually kind of insane, because now it sort of makes the misplay of not mesmerizing the first one less relevant, because if you were going to die to 2 regenerations, he found the 3rd anyways. But it's still definitely a mistake, because now, like, I mean, if Andross just draws a 2nd mesmerize, then if he had mes the 1st regeneration, then he can just mesmerize the 3rd regeneration, and then, right, and then Darksigner just, or he could snipe it with a Spire Puppet, right? So it took away his ability to interact with these. So if he'd mes the 1st, then a top deck discard could potentially get rid of all, it just wins the game, basically, because it gets rid of all the regenerations. And like I said before, the way Darksigner wins this game is by chaining multiples, and now he's got 3. So if he's gonna be able to dodge Vang, then he can probably win this game, because he's got all 3 regenerations. but dodging Vang is a big ask when you're gonna have to at some point poke for shields, most likely, and you're also giving 2 Keeper of Laws triggers each time. This is also where, like, having, if you had like the buff from Cornucopia, that'd be kind of nice here. Like if you had the 5,000 power on Sumo Artichoke, you could actually start getting rid of these things, which is a nice axis of the veggie package. Is it just gives you, it makes your deck a little less anemic because, I mean, yeah, you're just have nothing in your deck that can like beat over Keeper of Laws, whereas at least in veggies and stuff you can play the 2,000 power bonus that Cornucopia gives is pretty relevant. Darksigner thinking about, I guess, what to do with the Regen. And yeah, the thing is, like, because he doesn't have the apple or like any extra mana, he can't regen from multiple bodies, really. He's got to go for the 1 creature regeneration, which means he's doing the Finbar. And okay, this makes sense. And he's just going for shields right away, which is definitely, I think, the thing that you have to do here. It's really risky because you're giving Vang, but I think the problem is if you wait, like the longer you wait, the more you're gonna get blown out by like the last Storm Spark Blast. Whereas like if you can break it in one of maybe this turn, then you can potentially beat that. Whereas if you wait to go like, okay, I'll play the next regen next turn, then you're probably again gonna have to do it for just the 1 Finbar, right? And then you only have 4 creatures, which means like you still can't go for game in 1 turn. So that means you're in a position where you're probably gonna have to do this same kind of poke the next turn, right? But if you don't attack this turn, that leaves you open to just getting killed by a Mesmerize, right? It makes more live draws against you because breaking the shields this turn means that like if your opponent draws, I mean, no matter what, if your opponent draws Vang, they're gonna win the game, right? But if you make this attack and they draw Mesmerize, then they just Mesmerize a 1 regen, and then you can go for like the Finbar play next turn, and then make another push on shields. Again, if you lose to a Vang, but at that point, like your opponent, you're out of regenerations, then you can just untap and hopefully kill them the 3rd turn. So you're trying to kill them over 3 turns. If you wait this turn, then that means Mesmerize basically kills you because they just Mesmerize the 2nd regen. Does it kill you? Yeah, it does. Right, kind of. Because if you just pass this turn, they Mesmerize one of the regens. Then on your turn, you make the regen play. I guess not technically, but it gets scary, right? Because they Mesmerize. Then you just make the Finbar play. Then you push once on shields. And then they get to make a play, and then you don't have the regen the 3rd turn. But the thing is, like, the 3rd turn regen could potentially make some plays with, like, fast attacks. Maybe. Maybe not, because you don't have the cards to charge. I don't know. It just feels like you're going to have to kill over multiple turns. Like, basically, the thought is, I guess, like, you open yourself up to discard to some extent, just being able to interfere with your plays. Like, a discard spell taking this Finbar could save some life total because, like, then Darksigner can't rebounce the Grudge Reaver. So even if you can't pick off all the regens with Mesmerize, like, you could at least get rid of this Finbar, which makes it so that he can't make he can't run back the Swift Regeneration for Finbar play to bounce your blocker and push for damage. So if you don't wait, it basically just waiting makes Stormspark a card that kills you more often. It also makes a discard more relevant, and on top of that, like, I think waiting it just puts more pressure. It makes blockers better against you too, because Darksigner or Andross already has a bunch of mana. So if you can put out multiple blockers the next turn, it basically just waiting just is worse for you because no matter what, you're gonna have to break a bunch of these shields over multiple turns anyways, which means all these shields being potential looks at Vang are gonna happen no matter what. So you might as well just get it over with sooner than later, because getting it over with sooner insulates you a bit from discard, from blockers, from Stormspark Blast. So it makes sense to just go for it sooner, especially because it also like insulates you from Spire Puppet if you get these draws sooner than later, I guess, off the Finbar. Although, actually, no, that's not a real point, because you can just attack his creatures if you want the draws, so never mind on that one. But, yeah. So, dodges the Vang, snipes around. Nice. So, yeah, I think I'm a fan of just getting the attacks over with sooner than later. It just gives you more opportunities to play around a bunch of stuff, I guess. Because, again, you're going to have to give Andross turns with those cards regardless at some point, I think. But he didn't draw the best. Like, he didn't find... Like, he's got some interruptions, right? But Darksigner's set up to... I mean, he can just run back to Finbar play, bounce the Grudge Weaver, and break another 3 shields, ideally. Finds Durian. You could get fancy and just like regeneration for no creatures to try to draw like a steam tank or something. Which maybe, I don't know, he didn't charge the Finbar. Weird. Maybe he's going for that, or he's just trying to play the Durian, but Durian seems worse here than... Because it's not tapped. So there's some confusion here, it feels like. I don't know. Because if it's not tapped, then he's just breaking 2, and then he's going for the regeneration next turn to... I don't know. It just gives him... Like, it gives him less breaks this turn, which is kind of, like, runs opposite to what he did last turn, but... It gives him the ability to like just untap regen for the next turn, and then he's insulated from Vang the following turn. So you can just poke for a shield, like just get through for 1 shield here, or maybe 2 if Andross doesn't block. And then Darksigner can untap. So if he dodges Vang this turn, then the problem is like you're just going for game the same turn that you're going for the Durian. So maybe you're trying to play around Stormspark a bit more. Otherwise, you could potentially like give him an extra turn of looks without that Durian protection. Is maybe what you're going for here. I don't know. I guess that kind of makes sense, because like you can do that, and then if you draw... It lets you charge the Blitz next turn. If you don't bring back anything, you could just go for like a bigger attack next turn. But that seems weird because like the Finbar is just 2 attacks this turn. But I guess it sets like 2 attacks now. Is that better than like 1 attack? Like, I don't know. Because yeah, going for the Finbar, break 2 shields, clean, versus... And then next turn you have to deal with the Grudge Weaver again, and then your board's only 4 creatures and you have no haste things, then maybe you can't kill. Whereas if you like go for 0 this turn, and then next turn go for like the Blitz in mana, get back 3 things, then you have... He can't replay the Grudge Weaver, you get him for like 1 shield this turn, and then next turn you have like 5 attackers, so maybe you could go for like a fancy play of like not bring back anything. But at that point, you basically lose to Mesmerize because they just pick off the 3rd regeneration and you can't bring back the Blitz. So again, this kind of makes sense to just like bounce your dude, break 2 shields, break as many shields as possible, and then like you have to replay your blockers, and then maybe I have lethal through it. If you don't have discard, if you can't spend mana, like, or if you want to spend mana on discard, then you're not spending mana on blockers, which makes this board better. Which kind of makes sense to me. Whereas otherwise the discard just beats you pretty much. Like this way, like discard can maybe hurt you, but it's not answering the board, and it costs mana. Like, this makes this card look bad, and lets you potentially, and then wow. Interesting. Okay, never mind, yeah. It's all good. So yeah, Darksigner did change his play, so I guess he charged. Didn't really, maybe rethought about it. I don't know what he was thinking exactly. Maybe he was thinking along the lines of like those Durian setups to try to secure, but just goes for like the most damage possible and breaks some shields, and wow. Andross still just completely dodging the Vang, just nowhere to be seen. Which is crazy. He'd been through half his deck, seen almost all his shields, seen a bunch of draws off. Wow. And just whiffing. Okay. Okay, so it looks like Andross just missed the Laws trigger. So he just draws those extra 2 cards now, which makes sense, I guess. He missed it, but Darksigner lets him get it just because, I guess, Darksigner made the whole exchange out your mana zone play. Like, just switch his mana choice and all that, so makes sense to just give one back to Andross to let him get those draws triggers, but he still whiffs on Vang, which is funny. Just still nowhere to be seen. Just completely out of sight, and now doesn't even find, I guess he doesn't have that many more. He's got like 2, he's only got 4 blockers in his deck, and we see 3 of them already, so he can at least present a couple. Now playing Spire Puppet into 1,000,000 cards. It's the Durian. Probably just, yeah, has to play one of these Grudge Weavers, or both, not one of them, both of them. So, I mean, as it stands, right, he's just kind of dead unless he has a Shield Blast. And, yeah, I mean, he is. Like, he needs that Storm Spark, right? He's got 1 left. Because I guess Darksigner now just has to figure out, like, he managed to dodge all the Vangs, and now he's just got to figure out, like, what the best way to kill the opponent is. And I think it's just playing the regeneration, right? Because Bone Blades is irrelevant as a Shield Blast because none of your stuff gets Bone Bladed. So it's just, how do you play around a Terror Pit? And you play around Terror Pit by playing Swift Regen, right? Because if you just, like, yeah, Root Trapping a blocker doesn't matter. Or Root Trap, okay, never mind, yeah. What am I saying? Yeah, so Root Trapping a blocker plays around Terror Pit because you have 4 attackers to 2 stops, and if it's a Terror Pit, they have 3 stops, but you have 4 attackers, so you win. So Root Trap and Regen both play around Terror Pit, but the difference is Regen kind of plays around, or does play around Stormspark, because you just get that extra turn. So, right, because Regen stops your stuff from being banished, which means Terror Pit can't kill any of your creatures. So, yeah, I don't know, I guess there's just some thought here. And Darksigner thinking what to do. Still thinking. I don't know. It seems pretty, like, yeah, I mean, they're basically the same. Like, both play around Terror Pit, and both potentially lose to Stormspark Blast. The only difference is that Swift Regeneration only loses to Stormspark Blast if Andross can finally find that Vang. And I guess he only gets to look at 3 cards to do it. So there's still, like, a decent chance that you survive if you just play this 3rd Regeneration. So, yeah, I think this is a slight misplay. But if there's no Stormspark, there's no punish anyways. And funnily enough, he still doesn't see the Vang. So if it is a Stormspark and Vang's not the top card of deck, then Darksigner definitely punted, I think, because Swift Regeneration is just strictly better for going when it comes to going for game than. But it is a Terror Pit, but again, doesn't matter. Because, like I said, Terror Pit can't banish. Like, it doesn't work under Swift Regeneration. So yeah, I think a slight misplay at the end there, but interesting, like good, really, I think really well done from Darksigner to win that game. I mean, to be honest, he got crazy lucky because he had to dodge like the Vang off of, I mean, an insane amount of draws. Like from this position, like yeah, like Darksigner or Andross ended at like 8 cards in deck and saw like all four of his 5 shields for Vang. So he saw like 10 to 12 cards to look at Vang, and he just completely whiffed. And so that was insanely lucky from Darksigner to win this game. But at the same time, like I mean, he made the right decisions. I think he just went for these back-to-back Fin bars, used his cards really well, picked his spots to just push for damage and try to play around as much as possible, which I think he did well. Just going for like the back-to-back Regen plus Fin bar plays, and he made the best of it. And I think I mean, there wasn't too much Andross could do. I think a couple of the relevant decisions were maybe not poking with the Skull Cutter early on. I think poking there maybe plays around Tendril a bit better than everything else. At the same time, then your opponent doesn't Tendril, you don't draw the extra cards, but it just gives more lethal setups. And it actually would have been hugely relevant. It would have been huge. It would have won him the game if he poked with the Lurking Skull Cutter. Darksigner would have been basically forced to use the Sumo Artichoke to stay alive, to stop himself from dying to the double keeper. He would have had to have used the Artichoke tapped, in which case he just loses the game, because that whole game went downhill for Andross because he was never able to out the Artichoke plus Regen, and he would have been able to preemptively out it by just forcing Darksigner to sacrifice his own Artichoke if he had just poked with the Skull Cutter that earlier turn. Like this turn here, if he had just made this attack, put Darksigner to 1 shield, Darksigner, best he does is like Finbar, bounce lost, attack over the Skull Cutter, and then he's just sitting on 1 shield, and then Andross just untaps, attacks the last shield, it's an Artichoke, it has to come in tapped, you kill the Artichoke with the laws, and then all Darksigner can really do, like he's at 6 mana at that point, and yeah, you just kind of you kind of lose. I mean, maybe you go for the Tendril anyways to get yourself up to 8 mana or whatever, but then all you're doing is like regenning out of like you're just dead. You can't out the 2 laws. There's no way you can out the 2 laws. There's no way for you to get an indestructible attacker. And the way things went, if Andross just made this attack, he would have won the game. So that's really interesting to see how that ended up affecting things. And then I guess the other play was mesmerizing. It didn't end up mattering because I think, well, it kind of mattered, right? It did end up kind of mattering because Darksigner didn't need to use all 3 regenerations to win the game. He only ended up using 2 of them, and he immediately found like the 3rd regeneration. If Andross had just mesmerized one of the 2, then Darksigner would have just immediately found the 2nd anyways, and again, it only took him 2 to win the game. But the thing is, like, that was a misplay, undoubtedly, just because, as we saw, he needed to chain multiple regens. If you ever draw, like, another Mesmerize or Spire Puppet to snipe one of those, the 2nd regen, then he's completely out. He just loses the game. He's not able to play 2 back-to-back. So that cut off some outs for, some extra outs for Andross. And then on top of that, I think... yeah, that play definitely cost him. And at the end of the game, as we saw as well, when Darksigner had to go for lethal, it could, if he had made the right play and played Swift Regeneration, then Andross basically worsened his out because of not mesmerizing that Swift Regeneration. In this spot here, if he does end up having the Storm Spark and shields, then because he didn't mez the Swift Regeneration, he could still lose if he doesn't find Vang, even if he does have. So it makes Storm Spark a worse card in Shield Zone because he didn't mesmerize it. So, yeah, those are a couple things. I think the Lurking Skull Cutter was like a really innocent play that ended up basically losing him the game downstream, which is kind of crazy, but that is kind of what ended up happening. So that was game one. Really crazy, insane game, to be honest. Like, just a crazy fun one to watch. Seeing all the just dodging Vang for. I mean, that was a crazy. Like, I'm sure Darksigner was probably thinking to himself when he had to make that regen play on the artichoke. Like, yeah, I'm probably dead here, but I'll just like go through the motions, force my opponent to have it, and then his opponent just ended up not having it for forever. So has to feel good about that one. Anyways, we will see you soon for game two. All right, so we're back for game two here between Darksigner and Andross. Of course, Darksigner won that first game, and it looks like Andross still decided to put Darksigner going first, which is an interesting decision, of course. It looked like his opening hand was a bit more reactive with the Vang and the Mesmerize, and he will maybe, I guess, wanted to leverage the Mesmerize a bit better and try to just focus on disrupting Darksigner rather than trying to put on a similar draw like the first game where he applies a little bit more pressure. But I don't know. It makes sense, I guess. Like, Mesmerize is an effective card, and Darksigner is pretty key, or depends a lot on putting together some certain synergies. But yeah, I'm not sure. It is an interesting decision. I can just see why, especially with the Grudge Weaver as well. If that blocks, like keeping your opponent on low resources, I guess that makes sense. There was an interesting decision as well from Darksigner early on, whether or not he wanted to hold that logo scan and maybe try to get more value out of it. Maybe I was thinking something along the lines of maybe I would have charged the Seneschal instead and then kept the logos for turn 3 just so I have 2 plays into Bad Apple, especially because logo scan is really good if you're thinking you might get mesmerized. But at the same time, having 2 4-drops is also good in the case that you get mesmerized, but it ended up not really mattering because Darksigner ended up just top decking the second logo scan. That said, though, I mean, maybe having 2 Seneschals, or sorry, maybe having 2 logo scans is pretty good in this spot, but maybe not. Like, I like kind of just getting down the Seneschal and applying some pressure. And if you're, so yeah, Darksigner makes the attack just to get that draw. If you're Andross, you could definitely think about attacking. Like, the hexproof for Keeper of Laws isn't super relevant, so you don't really, or at least not right now. And you can definitely get it on later before it does become relevant. So there's no really super big need to get this Grudge Weaver blocking, and blocking with it sooner than later. Just make sure you can actually get the block and the defense out of it. At the same time, maybe if you're Andross, you kind of want the extra card. Maybe not, though. Like, you can probably get the block in somewhere, so there's maybe no rush, but there's, like, getting the discard effect while Darksigner was a little bit lower on resources. And I guess maybe that's what Andross is also thinking. Like, Darksigner had 2 cards in hand. He's going up to 3. He probably has an easy discard. Maybe he wants to wait. But at the same time, like, he could end up in a spot where it gets even worse because that Seneschal is staying in play. It's staying active, and it's going to keep getting more cards. So, I don't know. It's hard to evaluate maybe when the best time to get that discard off is. It felt like maybe that was a good time just to get the block in and out of the way early. But I don't know. It's probably going to, more likely than not, it's probably going to end up doing something. But the problem is if you don't block with it either of these 2 turns, like a Finbar can come down and kind of punish you for that because you just like never get the defense. You never save the life, which is definitely relevant when you're facing a wide board like this. So I don't know. I would kind of want to just jump the gun and get the block out of the way, but I can definitely see arguments for waiting. But Darksigner, as it stands, I mean, he's mostly just found a lot of 2-drops so far. Like, hasn't really found the super substantive cards. Like, Bad Apple got mesmerized, so he's on the Seneschal plan, but hasn't. And the best way to complement that is with a Finbar, which is looking incredibly strong if he can find it. But on Andross's side, I mean, he's got a bunch of stuff. He could go like double blocker this turn. Maybe play the Lost Patrol. I don't know if I like charging the Gloom, though. I like having access to blockers later just to help secure your position. Like, having multiple blockers makes Finbar harder to push for damage, or it makes it hard for a Finbar to like push for damage. Well, I guess that's the same. Yeah. Anyways, yeah, I think like having multiple blockers, just multiple cheap defensive plays, I think is nice just to hold on to. And I guess like the question is, you can't charge the Gloom. So I'm basically saying like if you're not gonna play the Gloom this turn, which you can't because, well, yeah, I don't know. You could hold the Lost Patrol, but basically you probably just charge the Scared Orb of Gloom or the Screeching, which maybe you think is better. But I don't know. I feel like Screeching might be better because like Vang will probably clean up these cheap creatures that Scared Orbital. Like these both target the same thing, and I'd rather have like the guaranteed defense kind of card in Gloom Hollow. I'm not sure. I think Gloom Hollow is just basically the slightly better defensive card, so I would probably hold it over the Scared Orbital. Basically, is what I'm saying. But yeah, but I like Lost Patrol, kind of challenges the board a bit better. You could also make the argument for just like charge Screeching play, or no, yeah, that's worse. You just want to get the multi-sib in play, right? So on Darksigner's side, just more 2-drops, which is kind of unfortunate. Again, like a Finbar here. I mean, a Finbar here is not the best, but it lets him just get a bunch of draws, basically, and just try to clear these Grudge Weavers. And that's one of the other reasons for waiting on the Grudge Weavers is you feel like if you can get a trade and like get that 2-for-1 out of it or something like that, like get the body, which is one of the reasons to hold it. But I don't know. In this spot here, like they're probably just, that's the thing, is like they're just gonna get Tendril Grasped, and sure you get the extra mana, which is relevant, but you never get the defense, which is definitely matters. Like he could have been up a shield or something, and now he's a little bit closer to dying than he otherwise would have. But it's kind of hard to navigate. I'm not sure what was optimal to do with these Grudge Weavers, but I think with Darksigner's side, I think this turn I think Tendril Grasp makes sense. Just Tendril Grasp clears the Grudge Weavers and the Lost Patrol. And then you put your 2/2 into mana, and then you can just cast a Renegade. So it puts you on 8 lands, which gives you a bunch of mana. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Like alternatively, you can just drop 3 2-drops, maybe charge a Tendril, and then I think I would probably just send with, yeah, like just play out your whole hand, trade off a couple things maybe, because he's incentivized to trade, and then you have like 4 creatures left to maybe his 2 shields, and then you can set up for game next turn. But you just really die super hard to a Clash from Vang that way. So I don't know. Yeah, I can. This is a little more defensive, and he goes for the attack, which I think I like as well. Just putting him on 1 shield, this means like Swift Regeneration is like a kill card, right? Because you can just draw, and that gives you a fast attack. And you're just really hinging on, like, this is kind of how you have to play the deck. Like, even if he loses his Seneschal, he still got the card back out of it. And also on top of that, he knows, again, like, he's respecting a card like Vang or even Lyra or something along those lines. Like, those cards answer the Seneschal. So if he just sits there with the Seneschal, not wanting to give it up to the Keeper of Laws, it's just going to die to a Vang anyways. And sure, like, leaving it up, like leaving the Seneschal back, might make sure that he can like break the shield. All he's really making sure is that he can break the shield next turn because it keeps a body alive. But if that's what you want to maintain, if you're playing around Vang by not attacking with the Seneschal so you can keep a body alive, like your goal with that is to break an extra shield. But you could have just broken the shield right away with the Seneschal and drawn a card, which is exactly why it's better to just get it over with, like Darksigner said, or like he did, which is just, sure, you might get a clear board, but either way you you might get your board cleared. Most likely you will get your board cleared, but at least this way you break the shield already. And again, you're setting up, and with the way this is looking right now, like a top deck Swift Regeneration could definitely be the game, because this Renegade is most likely going to end up in Darksigner's mana zone, and then a top decked Regeneration after he charges up to 10 mana, he can go regen out Steam Tank plus a 2-drop, and then play the second 2-drop, and that's 2 attackers to 1 shield. So Andross is definitely actually getting punished for charging that Gloom because he did get Tendril Grasp. He had all this mana. If he had it instead of the Screeching Scare Adorable, he could have deployed it this turn, and then he would have a blocker, which actually defends him from the top deck lethals that Darksigner is representing here. So that cheap defensive, kind of guaranteed defensive play, because like I was saying, you already have Vangs and stuff to check those creatures that or that Screeching Scare Adorable, I should say, is answering. So just the cheaper defensive cards that you can just spit out to protect your life total in these tight spots, because like you're trying to fade Swift Regeneration a lot in this matchup, which is why I don't like playing super loose with my life total. And Andross did a little bit by not blocking with the Grudge Weavers, but he gives him this mana. And like I was saying, it's kind of iffy to say what exactly was optimal to do and when to block and when not to. And like the Tendril Grass trade wasn't the least profitable for him by any means. Like it worked out decently. Like it simplified the board state, but gave everyone a bunch of mana, I guess. So maybe that's not technically simplifying, but whatever. And then yeah, just being down that cheap blocker I think is relevant, and just wasn't the best way to, I think, hedge at protecting your life. So yeah, Darksigner just really praying for a regeneration, which would be, like I was saying, a potential lethal. Obviously you have to beat a Shield Blast, but I mean, you kill through Terror Pit and Bone Blade, so it's literally just Storm Spark that you have to dodge if you top deck regen. But unfortunately he doesn't, so still lacking. I mean, Finbar, the problem is like Finbar would have been a great card to see a couple turns ago, but now it's getting to the stage where Finbar's not really, like if you're bouncing, like you're just basically looking to just like Finbar and not even bounce anything, because bouncing Vang, there's a decent chance you just lose a clash and your Finbar dies anyways. Like it sets him back to mana, but which I guess maybe if you expect or Andross to just be playing more Vangs anyways, or Lyra's even, like you might as well just bounce to get the mana out of it. But yeah, Finbar, we've sort of missed the stage or the window where that would have been a really effective card. It still helps if he can survive with a board, but yeah, it's really just looking like a situation where he needs to find his regeneration. But just with a handful still of 2-drops and Bad Apple also coming late to the party. Obviously, the first one he did have in his opening hand, but it was hit by the Mesmerize. But I think in this spot, if I am Darksigner, I don't know. I like holding, so I definitely like holding at least one 2-drop. Which, if you want to play like Bad Apple plus double creature, you're going to do anyways. But I also... so one thing to note is your lethal top deck with Swift Regeneration is still something you want to play towards, I think. Or obviously. And just part of that too is because Andross's deck only has 4 blockers in it that can stop that setup. And 3 of them are already in his mana zone. So he only has the one Gloom Hollow left that he can potentially draw as a preemptive out to a top deck Swift Regeneration still. So I think knowing that that's the case, I think you definitely want to play towards it. And I think the way you do that, you obviously need to keep a card in hand that's a 2-drop that you can play for the regen after you play the regen. And you also need an untapped mana to charge to cast the regen. So I think you want to hold 2 cards. You need to hold an untapped mana and a 2-drop so that your Swift Regeneration top deck is still a kill. So I think you can definitely just play, or I guess like technically you don't need to hold 2 cards. Like you can also just charge one right now, which is I guess the same thing. But like I don't mind just playing Bad Apple, and then I guess you can charge one now if you want to. Because Mesmerize... Yeah, double discard kind of... Well, the best way to play around double discard as like stopping that top deck would just be to charge the Bad Apple and pass, which seems like probably not right. I think the most sensible thing is just to like maybe hope, and maybe that's the thing is like it's so likely that Andross has an out. Maybe you do just do something dumb like that, like just charge Bad Apple and pass. So that way at least like if Andross untaps and goes like double puppet, you can still win with the top deck regeneration. Because like most likely, if you're expecting Vangs and Lyras, like you're just gonna lose the two creatures. Like it's just so likely you lose them, I guess. So there is an argument for that play, but I think the thing that makes the most intuitive sense is like just play Bad Apple and Pineapple. Because if the Pineapple dies, like it goes to mana anyways, so that means like even if Darksigner has one disc, or even if Andross has like one discard effect, you're still getting that card to mana. Most likely if it dies, like if he goes like Puppet plus Lyra or Puppet plus Vang or something like that. So yeah, I think it makes the most sense to just playing the Pineapple's pretty free because it ends up in mana. Unless Andross wanted to get like really weird and just like play Lyra and keep it tapped. If he's like gonna go super deep, respecting that kind of top deck as well, like it could get really weird where he does that. But yeah, we'll just skip through some of the dead space here. And yeah, interesting spot, but I think yeah, that just makes the most sense, I guess. It just at least it means like you're not getting too fancy where if like Andross just somehow had like nothing, which doesn't really make too much sense because like he doesn't have like that many vanilla things, like unless you think his hand is like double Lost Patrol and like 2 more Keeper of Laws or something weird, or another Keeper of Laws, and most of the stuff he does will be relevant kind of removal, or like maybe a pile of Terror Pits I guess could be in his hand, like I don't know. I guess yeah. So I mean it makes sense to, I don't know if you need to charge, but you could definitely go, I mean Lyra just outs everything. So yeah, I think just Lyra plus like Skullcutter to build out the board. You could also so he goes for Lyra, which makes sense. Like just keep everything he's got access to. So he just goes for the Clash. Another option. It depends, like if he wants to charge, which maybe doesn't make sense. Like you probably want to build out your board a bunch to just kill through some Shield Blasts, which means you probably want all the creatures you can have. But like there's an argument to like charge Skullcutter, and then you can go like Screeching. I mean it's you have so much removal. I was just thinking like some weird plays where you keep like a Bad Apple tap, that way like you have a good attack target for your Vang next turn, which makes things a little bit easier if things go weird and you need to out certain stuff, like being able to play a Vang from hand and then also have like a card to easily attack with Vang without having to risk going into shields. Like you could make a weird play like Screeching this, Lyra tap this and not attack it, for example. But yeah, those are probably just fancy, unnecessary things, especially like I was saying, you just want to get probably the most out of all your cards. You have an abundance of removal anyways, but I don't know. I think you could come up with some reasons and in terms of like playing around certain things where I think that might be a decent play. Like in the case, like maybe a top deck regeneration does happen and you do have the Storm Spark, then yeah. Then like maybe that helps you clear the board through a regeneration without having to like pray for some good clashes. But here Darksigner draws. I think again you want to be thinking about top deck regen. So I don't think you want to play both creatures. Oh, I definitely don't like charging the Durian does seem completely useless though, right? I don't know. No, what am I? Yeah. I don't know if there's something he's playing towards. Huh. There's only one thing I can really think of. Yeah. Cause like yeah, I don't know. I don't know about this play. I really don't. Like the only thing I'm thinking of is he wants to like he's basically he's on the wavelength of like I need to top deck regeneration or something. Like that seems like what he's thinking. And he wants to go to 11 mana because that means he can top deck like logo scan and potentially draw into the regeneration. Now like he's only got one logos left. So maybe that's not what he's thinking, but that feels like what he's thinking. And then to that end, he doesn't want to just randomly hold the Durian in hand because like it could just get picked up by a Spire Puppet, and then all of a sudden, like if he top decks logo scan, he feels terrible because he can't draw into the regeneration anymore. So I think that's probably like that's what I can think of off the top of my head as to why he would make that play. But it feels so like I feel like if you're worried about Spire Puppet like and you don't want this to just die because there's so many things that just will kill this. I feel like you should just hold both because I think you still like this just completely cuts off your ability to like top deck regeneration for the game because now you're not presenting lethal anymore. So yeah, I don't really like that at all. Like I would just hold both 2-drops, or I would just commit and drop both 2-drops so that I'm presenting lethal if he has nothing. Because it feels like this is going to die to a lot of things incidentally. And yeah, I don't know. You only have one Logos left. And if you keep the 2 cards, and if you just keep both Trickster and Durian in hand, then like if you get puppeted, then you still have like again, you still have lethal through if you keep both cards in hand. If you get puppeted, you still have like lethal if you top deck regeneration, or you could still have the ability to play regeneration off a logo scan if you top deck logos, because you can just charge whatever other 2-drop didn't get hit. So I don't know. That feels not great. I don't think. Because, yeah, I feel like if you're just going to play this out, like, I feel like why not play both out? Like, I get that you can't because you want to root trap and then... But I feel like... That's why I would just, like, root trap and pass and not charge anything and just keep both in hand. That makes the most sense to me. Because, like, obviously, if you play both out, he's got the Vang in hand. But if you're hoping he has, like, nothing to incidentally kill this and, like... I don't know, like he could just like playing both might make it so that like Andross feels incentivized to attack your shields, which maybe ups the chances that you can find that regen. So I don't know. It feels yeah, but if you find the regen and you didn't root trap the Vang, it feels really bad. So I can understand like yeah, I feel like yeah, playing the 2, like I said, like playing the 2 I don't really like that either. Like I think just hold the 2 in hand. It makes the most sense to me. And just root trap the Vang outright. Because you want to get rid of the Vang. Like if he has more Vang, so be it. But like you want to get rid of that before you regen ideally. And yeah, just playing the 2 things and then incentivizing Andross to attack your shields. It feels like that's just not going to be too good because when you do find the regen, well, maybe like you have the opportunity to find like a 2-drop plus the regen out of shields if he does go for attacking it. But at the same time, you're also facing lethal. So if you hadn't root trapped, it would have felt kind of bad. So if you just like get the game stolen, if he just starts going for game. So I like root trap and then I like holding, but I don't like. Yeah, I mean he's not getting punished here because he just top decks more 2-drops. But like if he had I mean that's an argument. Like if he had just played both creatures, like. He could have potentially lethaled if he found a Swift. But I do like him holding the 2-drop that time. And with Darksigner top decking, I mean, the only way like Darksigner can really top deck now is like some really, really unlikely stuff. Like he needs like Logos into like just double Blitz Commando. Like he would need some really ridiculous, really ridiculous sequences to actually win. So I don't mind just like waiting and building up your board. But yeah, maybe it would have been risky. Like I said, he was facing lethal. So if you do present like the double creature, I mean, Andross would have just like Bone Blades plus like Screeching, and he would have had the outs anyways, or Bang plus Screeching. But yeah, now he chooses to go. But yeah, maybe like in trying to get Andross to taking the chance to get Andross to like attack you, maybe that gives you more odds at finding lethal. But you also are at risk of getting lethal yourself if you don't have a Shield Blast. So I don't know, maybe you take that high risk, but at the same time, like just losing both cards and not root trapping the Vang makes a lot of other situations go worse. Like if you just root trap the Vang, it gives you the chance to just draw the Swift, but maybe that's less likely than, I don't know, it gets weird. So he's got the Blast, but yeah, not really, nothing that can save him now. And that is game 2. So that game, almost similar to the first one. Like we saw the first game, Andross was left with like 17 cards in deck and had seen all 5 shields or whatever. And like he saw 0 Vangs. And this game was almost like the same, where Darksigner sees all of his shields and he's down to like 15 cards left in deck, and he sees 0 Swift Regenerations and 0 Finbars. So I think both players kind of at the receiving end of just some unfortunate luck and sort of losing games that maybe they could have won otherwise. But yeah, just definitely an interesting match. Some interesting decisions in that game. I don't know. Darksigner, I'm sure, probably has some justifications for the decisions he made in the mid game. But I feel like maybe, yeah, a couple things. Like the turn where he just root trap played a 2-drop, I felt like it was just better to hold both. But I think everything else was fine, and he just kind of got a bit unlucky. And then Andross' side, I think the one thing was, if he had just held that Gloom Hollow, it feels like, because he had all these redundant removals and stuff, and he ended up with all of these redundant removal effects, like the Screeching. I mean, it was a body, I guess, but I don't know if it was too relevant for killing, making sure he could complete lethal on Darksigner. So yeah, it feels like that was kind of just not really better. Like I feel like Gloom Hollow would have actually, like one of the ways he could have lost this game was to that top deck regeneration at a lot of points. And if he had Gloom Hollow, that wouldn't have even been a possibility. So I think that was maybe the one mistake, was that charge. Everything else seemed fine as well. So yeah, definitely an interesting game. Fang just really showing its power, just like so hard to contest and makes things really awkward. You don't even want to play creatures anymore, especially with tap effects like Lyra, just so easy to chain board clears and really punishes the anemic style of Darksigner's build. But yeah, we'll be back for game 3 shortly. All right, we're into game 3. Darksigner, of course, on the losing end of game 2, so I believe he decides to actually go first. So makes the decision. I mean, sees a very strong hand. I mean, this time he's got 2-drop, he's got the 3-drop, he's got double good 4-drops. Yeah, just a really nice hand to see. And I mean, Andross, he's got Vang, he's got 2 keepers, which are pretty powerful. Draws the second bad apple, and it kind of makes the mana decision easy. I guess it gets really awkward if he top decks a multi here. but you'd probably just, I guess, charge the multi and pass. And Logos coming down a little later isn't the biggest deal, but draw Sumo, which is just a really clean, easy mana decision. Logos finds Blitz, which, yeah, I mean, yeah, you're gonna jam the Apple next turn, and then would be really nice to get this in mana as soon as possible so it doesn't get discarded, but you're probably just gonna have to jam the Apple. But double Apple is just super powerful, so I think Trox or Keeper makes sense to charge here. Probably Trox, because it's just a really inflexible removal card, and being able to go Keeper, or maybe or you're probably going to place Fire Puppet into Keeper, or either other way. Yeah, maybe you lead on Keeper. I could see an argument for that. So yeah, just top decks Pineapple. Opts to keep Seneschal over it, which makes sense. The thing I'm thinking is, like, it would be nice to keep the Pineapple just so you can go 4+2 next turn. But the problem is, like I was saying, you probably want to get this Blitz into mana right away. And then if that's the case, and it being a multi as well, it just makes things awkward, because then you can't go like Bad Apple plus 2-drop anyways. Like if you get multi-screwed there because you charge the Seneschal instead of the Pineapple. And yeah, things could go downhill. You probably want to charge this anyways. And on top of that, you're missing the card draw. So I think with one Bad Apple going already, the Seneschal makes sense just to get the card draws. So yeah, it is pretty. As much as I'd like to go wide again, like going wide maybe not the best long term against Vangs, but yeah, it just makes sense. I don't know. I guess I can get behind that. Unfortunately, hits a Bone Blade. Yeah, that's really unfortunate. Just loses it. I mean, he goes up to 6 mana now. So now, seeing that Bone Blades come down, I mean, maybe he does kind of get punished for not holding the Pineapple, but even still, like, again, like, you'd probably rather have the Seneschal. Not being able to go wide, not the biggest thing. Well, it is. It kind of is, right? Like, you want to just put on a bunch of pressure. And yeah, it makes a lot of sense then, yeah. Given that you dealt with the 3k power Bad Apple now, you probably would have led with the... Wow, and he snipes that too. Wow, that's really unfortunate. Yeah, you would definitely, I think, have led with the Keeper in the face of... Well, maybe not. Yeah, it would make some sense to play Keeper in the face of the Bad Apple. But at the same time, like, Finbar would be so backbreaking that maybe you probably just play the Spire Puppet anyway, since it still answers a creature. Yeah, I think you lead on Spire Puppet no matter what, especially because you want to snipe that Finbar and whatever other power cards. He's on a low hand size right now, and now the decision is clearly made for you. And yeah, that's a good snipe, because getting rid of the fire card, I mean, Darksigner's only got 3 left, I should say, and that just really, if he can't find another one, that just really hurts the quality of his Swift Regeneration plays. So yeah, just not being able to get that down earlier was kind of unfortunate. But ends up top decking a 2-drop anyways. And goes for Bad Apple, makes the attack, which I'm a fan of. Just get the body, get the presence, and yeah, just... I wonder if there's an argument to... Because Swift Regeneration is kind of weak right now. Maybe there is an argument to just... Like, you don't need to get all the mana right away. Maybe you just lead on Seneschal for the draws. Just try to dig for a Finbar or a Regeneration. Or the fire cards, for example. Oh, I mean, well, okay, that's a bad point, because obviously Bad Apple digs for fire mana just the same as Seneschal does. But it digs for it better, to be honest. But, yeah, digging for Finbar and Regen is... maybe makes more sense than trying to ramp up, I think. Because, again, like Regen here, I guess it's fine. But not even in the face of Vang, like, it might not... Well... Yeah, I guess it's pretty good. Yeah, if you top deck Regen there. Oh, he does find a fire card, which is nice. Because, like, you can do them... Like, you can play the Seneschal anyways. But... Yeah, I kind of like just drawing, right? Because the thing is, like, if Renegade dies, it goes to mana anyways. So you're already potentially getting up to 8. And then on top of that... Like... I think just digging for more cards makes more sense. Because, like, you can play the Seneschal now to draw cards, but I'd rather have, like, the looks for my power cards, like, a little bit sooner, maybe. Maybe not. I don't know if that makes a difference. But if you did find a regeneration, I think it would have been quite good, actually, this turn. Because you just... Like, you can break 2... You can regen this turn, break 2 shields. And then Vang, like... Like, if you just bring back, like, Seneschal plus... Renegade or something, like Vang can only clear one or two creatures, and then you're looking at like three creatures to 1 shield remaining, and that seems pretty good to me. So I think like just digging for the regeneration a little bit sooner actually does make sense. Finbar, I mean Finbar would still be good too, like just starts drawing a ton of cards. If you follow up the Seneschal with it, all of a sudden you're drawing like 2 cards off the Trickster and stuff, and or choose 2 cards off of the Seneschal on the follow-up turn, I should say. But I guess it's basically just regeneration that you're drawing for, which I think is probably worth it actually, because I think that would have. There's a good likelihood that regeneration with only like, yeah. There's a good chance that regeneration would have just like won the game if he was able to find it. I guess he wouldn't have, but I kind of like just drawing the cards more than getting the extra mana. Or what am I saying? Yeah. Yeah. Finds a Finbar though and charges 1 too. So he's got some follow up, but this is where like Vang can be just really disgusting now. Is like he can clear the 2 creatures. Potentially. I mean if he hits it here it's really big. Because it just clears the whole board. So yeah, this is just really rough. Oh yeah, one thing I didn't know. Oh. Yeah, I don't know if I like that he didn't break the shield. Yeah, for some reason I was like, why isn't he at 1 shield? And it's because he killed the Spire Puppet, which I don't know if I like. Like, I guess it makes it so that like you lose your board. Like it's one of the. It's like kind of the same thing as the other game where it's like when you poke with the Seneschal, in the sense that like if clearing the Spire Puppet, it just protects. It protects your other creature from dying to up the chance that you can break an extra shield the next turn. But the problem is like you could just break the extra shield right away and just guarantee that and then that's better because it just guarantees that it's broken. Because like attacking the Spire Puppet there means that if Andross loses a clash on a Vang, then he doesn't lose the Trickster. But he could have just broken the shield that the Trickster would break in that case with the Bad Apple. And then if you lose your whole board, then at least... Because, I don't know, it's pretty likely you lose a clash, I feel. And, yeah, I don't know. That seems like... Yeah, because, like, you need to just push for that damage. Especially because... when the fast attack card in your mana zone is Steam Tank, you don't have the same reach as you do with a Blitz Commando usually. Like Blitz Commando can be 3 cards out of your mana zone, which can kill against 2 shields. Whereas like Steam Tank, it it requires a lot more because it can only like kill from 0 shields, right? But usually you can pair these cards with a card from hand as well, and Steam Tank can pair with anything from hand, and that can clear from 1 shield. But it's really hard to go regen plus like multiple creatures, which you need to now clear from 3 or from 2 shields. So I think I think doing everything you can to get Andross low on shields is what you need to do there. So I don't think I like that trade or the attack. Like, I don't know, because again, like the best case scenario is like, I guess, I don't know, to be honest, like I'm just evaluating this with the Vang. Like maybe there's other stuff that Darksigner's playing around, I guess, which could be the case, but I don't want to think about that. I'm not going to spend time like thinking about all the possibilities. I'm just going to look at the Vang, which obviously is biased here because I'm looking at the hands and making my decisions based on like what's going on with the cards that he played. So maybe there's a bunch of other things that it's better to make the trade against. But I don't know. Yeah. But it ultimately, it feels like, I think the point, pretty much no matter what, the point that remains is that like killing the Spire Puppet to protect a creature, all it's doing is trying to like help you break that 1 extra shield with that creature, because then the Trickster's just going to suicide attack in next turn most likely. And I just feel like that's you can just bypass all the risk around that by just attacking with it. So I feel like maybe there's some justification you can give and for things you're playing around and respecting, but I feel like it all comes down to that kind of crucial point of like you're just trying to maximize your chance to like break that extra shield, which you could just do by attacking it with the bad apple. So yeah, it just feels a little bit iffy to me. Like the one benefit, of course, of if the Trickster survives is that it's an attack that draws a card because you most likely will play the Finbar. So like the untapping with the Trickster is a little bit better of a reward than breaking the shield with, like it's a little bit better than just poking for the shield because if you get that attack it draws you a card. So which is a card you wouldn't have drawn if you had just like attacked with the bad apple right away, I guess. But it still feels like it's not worth the risk. And here, Darksigner opts to just bounce the Vang instead of I mean, I guess if you win the clash, or if you can win the clash and your Finbar stays alive, then it makes like the top deck regen look somewhat appealing because then you can at least like try to break 2 shields and go somewhere with that. But this is also a spot where like if Darksigner had just broken that shield earlier, his Swift Regeneration would actually be just like a clear lethal top deck and he wouldn't be having to hope that things go right after a top deck regeneration. Because not breaking that shield, now he has to like hope that Finbar survives and then hope that he can like top deck regen, which he did, wow. And then hope that that regen can like push for game. Or hope that that regen can survive through a Vang, which is a little bit unlikely, or which is not unlikely, but your regen is obviously less effective, but you have to hope the Finbar survives, you play regen, you break both shields, and then you hope that you can untap with all of those and not be staring down too many blockers or lose too many things to Vang clashes or whatever. So, I mean, it's pretty there's decent chance if you don't lose that Finbar there that you could potentially kill, I guess, over 2 turns or a couple turns. Looking at the hand, though, maybe that's less likely. But now, but if you had just, like if he was able to win that clash after and top deck that regen, he probably would have just won the game again, like just being that 1 shield up. Wow. Yeah, I think that really matters. Because, I don't know, yeah. It just makes so many. It makes it because again, like it's just so hard to piece together lethals with this steam tank. Because even if things go right on that clash, you're still some amount of hope that things work out because you're not actually going for lethal. You're just breaking the 2 shields, and then you're kind of at the mercy of what your opponent has. Whereas, yeah, that 1 shield just means you're actually threatening lethal, and it's a lot easier to also find a creature to pair with the Cryon to just like kill that 1 shield. So now we're at a spot where I guess you just regen. So he takes a chance to regen now. I guess you could try to like root trap the Vang first. You're just gonna get blown out by discard, I guess, is the problem. You could try to get fancy and do that ahead of time. But here he goes for the regen. And it goes for the attack as well. Because again, I guess, yeah, you might as well, like... Yeah. And yeah, if he had made that really passive play, he would have got killed by Mesmerize, which, like, Andross hasn't seen any or played any of so far. So yeah, just trying to, I think, play around that, or trying to play around the Vang just gets really awkward. Because there's so many things that Andross could just blow you out with. Even just like playing some blockers makes this look worse. Which are, obviously are still relevant now, but... So lots of options. So you can go... Like, you could try to get fancy and just, like, play double blocker. Maybe that's actually good. Because if you play double blocker and then just, like, Vang down this... Like, what's the worst draw that Darksigner could do is, like... like, another regeneration or a Finbar is, like, breaks your last shield, which is kind of rough. And then you're down to 0 shields, but you kill board most likely. Like, you just have all this stuff, and you probably kill board. So Finbar would be a bad draw. And then a second regeneration, I guess, would get like 2 dudes most likely. But then you're worried about like a creature. If this was a... I mean, the thing is, this probably isn't a cheap... Or he knows this isn't a cheap creature, otherwise it would have come down, right? So it's got to be something expensive. So yeah, like a second regeneration would be kind of brutal. Like Tendril Grass plus a creature would also be lethal if he was like sitting on a Tendril. Like if he just draws a creature then and then just plays the last Tendril and like goes for game if you play double blocker. So yeah, double blocker seems kind of risky, right? You're just playing into a bunch of top decks, I guess. So the most obvious thing, I guess, then is just play Vang. And then at that case, it's really complicated in terms of like what you want to do with it. So yeah, he does decide for Vang. And so he opts to just target the Renegade. So I guess there's like 2 options here, right? So you can Vang... You can go about it this way, where you Vang the Renegade, which means you're basically, if you want to clear both creatures, you're committing to attacking shields. So you're basically saying, I'm going to attack this Renegade, and if I hit, and then I'm going to attack shields targeting the steam tank, and if I hit one of the 2 clashes, then I clear his board. And that's basically what you're saying. Like, as long as I hit one of the 2 clashes, then he's got no creatures. But of course there's a risk where if you lose both clashes, you probably just lose the game. most likely, like, you're very likely to lose a game if you lose both clashes, which losing both clashes is also not very unlikely, or not very likely. Yeah, so it's an unlikely outcome. The other option is to target, I guess, play the Vang, target the Steam Tank, and if you hit that clash, yeah, if you hit that clash, then you just kill both creatures outright, and you don't have to risk breaking shields either. And there's no also, right? So if you hit the first clash, then you kill both creatures. If you whiff the first clash, then at that point you just attack with Vang, and then I guess you get the option though, right? No, you don't. Yeah, the other option then is just target the Steam Tank. If you hit the clash, then things go well and you clear both creatures, because then you just kill the Steam Tank and then you attack the Renegade and clash and kill that. But if you miss the clash, then you just attack the Renegade and then kill the Steam Tank guaranteed. Or, yeah, so then you leave them with the Renegade. So that means, yeah, things, it kind of is a question. Like, I guess the question you have to ask yourself is, like, what's, like, the more dangerous thing that you want to consider? Like, are you more scared of this Bronze Arm staking in play to potentially attack you and put you to 0 shields next turn? Or are you more scared of, like, giving your opponent 2 shields? Because this line means you always give them 2 cards, but you also clear both creatures more often than the second line, which is just, I won't give them any cards, but there's a decent chance that the Renegade survives. But, like, I don't know, like, let's say if your clash odds, like, let's say you're something crazy, like 2/3. Like, let's say you're, I don't know what the numbers are, but let's be really generous and say you're like 2/3 to win a clash even. Then that means, like, this line is like 100% of the time you're going to give them 2 cards. 100% of the time you're going to give them the 2 cards and break potentially a shield blast, right? And then, like, around like 90, 89, 90% of that time, you are going to clear both creatures while giving them those 2 cards again. 90% of the time you're going to clear both creatures and give them 2 cards. And then 10% of the time, or 11%, whatever, you're going to give them 2 shields and only clear 1 creature. So that's like this line is 90% you clear both, but at the cost of giving them 2 cards. Whereas, and then again, like 10% of the time you just get blown out and lose. Whereas the other line is like 2/3 of the time, like if we're saying the first clash is 66, or like 2/3, then 66% of the time you just win the first clash, clear 1 creature guaranteed, and then clear both creatures. 66% of the time you clear both creatures, and then 33% of the time you just leave them with the Renegade, and you don't have to ever break 2 shields. So I guess it's like, how much, I guess you want to ask yourself, like, how much worse of an outcome is this Renegade surviving than giving them 2 shields? Because if you think it's really bad, because, like, the worry about these shields is they turn into damage that can, like, affect your life total, which this Renegade is going to be no matter what. So if you just assume these are crappy creatures that you can handle easily with your stacked hand, then that's fine, right? Or something like that. And, like, some percent of the time it goes really bad because this is like a Swift, or which isn't even the biggest concern, but, or it's like fire card plus, or it's like a Sumo Artichoke, I guess, would be really scary. So I guess, like, that's kind of the thing you're thinking about, is like these cards are maybe not as scary as this. And if that's the case, then, like, how much is it scarier enough that it's worth, like, the risk of Is it scarier enough that it's worth the risk of just 10% of the time completely losing the game and giving up on the like 66% of the time that you just like kill both creatures without giving them the 2 cards? Like, I don't know. It really depends. Like, it's hard to say anything for sure, right? Like, this is a spot like you would need like to go like supercomputer mode, like analyze, like look at all the cards that are what all the information, and like run the odds on the on the that you think there are for the clash odds, and then you could kind of maybe get a more accurate, because like obviously just working with like the workshop like 66% or something ridiculous like that is kind of, I mean, yeah, that's probably not really going to be an accurate depiction of the scenario, but like you would need to run the odds and like what these shields could possibly be, and like how often those are going to really punish you, how often those are going to be worse than the renegade, and then like you would need to go supercomputer mode to like really say for certain which is like the better decision. But to me, instinctually, like I feel like it would be better to just like take the chance of just like letting this renegade sit there, because like 2/3, like more than 50% of the time, I think you're just going to clear both creatures with ease and like not have to worry about it. And I feel like it's not worth giving up on that just to like increase the odds. Like you basically, like if we're going with the 2/3 thing, again, you're like increasing the odds by 24%-ish that you clear both, but it's at the cost of like taking on 10% risk that you just like lose the game. And 100% of the time you're also giving them 2 cards. Like you're always giving them 2 cards to up the odds that you clear both creatures by 24%. I don't know if like 24% more to clear both creatures is worth always giving them 2 cards, right? And then on top of that, taking on the risk that like the floor is even lower. If things go really wrong, you probably just lose. So I don't know. That's how I would kind of think about it, and like the questions you want to ask yourself in this kind of spot. But obviously when you're in the game, it's like really, really hard. Like Andross only took like a minute, or not even a minute. He took like a little bit of time to think about this. And intuitively, it feels like I would just target the steam tank first. That's what I would feel like is right intuitively, especially because like you have, like with this hand as well, you have the time to deploy everything. I don't think there's not really like an argument for me that you need to like get the pressure on right away. Like you don't need to like make a point of, it's not like breaking these shields is good for you because it puts them on a clock. Like I don't think that's really the case, because like over 2 turns, like you're not really going to be threatening lethal through a shield blast anyways. So you're going to take time to deploy your hand. Like if you break those 2 shields now, it's not like you're going for game next turn, I don't think. Or maybe you are, but you'd only be going in for game next turn if you're up against it. Because again, your hand is stacked. You can have a lot of defensive options. You can, like the Lyra plus Vangs does a great job at clearing things. So, yeah, I feel like, yeah, from this spot, I feel like there's like no rush to get those shields broken to shorten the span of the game, because like you're going to take the time to deploy your hand anyways. So I think, yeah, really complicated spot. Tough to really say anything declarative, but I think this is probably, or not probably, I think this is potentially a mistake. But again, you'd really need to run all the numbers, and like, yeah, this is like a crazy game situation. But interesting. I did talk to Darksigner about this spot too when I first saw it, and I think he agreed with he said he agreed with Andross's play. So that is fair. So 2 guys may be better than 1 on this, but yeah, definitely an interesting spot that warrants a good bit of discussion, I think. But yeah, I think I laid out some of like the thought process of maybe how you want to approach it, I guess, but definitely some random numbers thrown out there for sure. But yeah, we'll keep on rolling. So he does, of course, go for the Renegade, put it to mana, and I guess we'll see the clash here. And yeah, he wins the clash. So, I mean, yeah, if he had taken the other play, he would have just cleared both and not had to break these 2 shields. But I guess we'll see what they are. And yeah, just a couple cheap creatures. So ultimately doesn't really get, if it was a mistake, probably doesn't get punished for it. But again, we were talking really, really hard to say anything declarative there. I think a lot of just gut feeling, especially when you're playing in the moment. And I don't know, maybe there's also like a really easy answer that I'm just completely missing. But yeah, unfortunately, Darksigner is just kind of under the 2-drop curse, which to be fair is his deck. Like it's a ton of 2-drops, and if you're not like seeing a ton of back-to-back like power cards, it can be kind of rough. It is like that is part of like just the underpowered nature of this deck. Like lots of anemic little creatures, and you're kind of hoping that your Seneschals and Bad Apples stick around. Not just like that you can land them and get some immediate value, but you're also hoping that they kind of stick around, which is really hard to do in the face of a lot of stuff. Like Keeper of Laws, usually an anemic card in its own right, can just basically contest this entire deck and dominate the board. So yeah, that's one of the issues I think, and maybe a reason why I'm not really a fan of Seneschal in general. I think the card is maybe, I don't want to say like overrated or anything like that, but I think there's definitely reasons Corrupted is not that good, and I think part of it is Seneschal. I don't want to say trap either. Like I don't know if it's a trap. It's a good solid card, but it's a lot closer to whatever that thing from Gauntlet is, the 4/3 snapping eel. I don't even know if that's correct in any respect, but it's a lot closer than that than maybe people want to admit. I mean, that it does give the effect to all your creatures, so it is better. Obviously, I'm being a bit hyperbolic, but I do think the card is not too strong. But regardless, some vanging happening, and there is a regeneration, but now it's just really yeah, Darksigner really needed some like miracles there. He needs to find like one of his last fire cards. And like even then, like he needs like, yeah, like he needed like if this Finbar was just a steam tank or a blitz commando, he could potentially win here, but without it, it's just really, really tough. So Finbar bounce something. Makes sense. Alternatively, I guess you could like charge the Finbar and Swift, which, or you already have a Finbar, yeah. So you can just get Swift. Well, yeah, you can Swift back Finbar and then bounce. But if that's the case, then you need to bounce the Vang because, like I said, you still just don't have Artichoke alive. But he opts to bounce the Vang here, which I guess is basically the same thing as bouncing Serpents, because the Vang's going to get the trigger either way. So yeah, effectively the same thing. But this means like he doesn't get to... Yeah, this is just better though. Yeah, obviously just better. Because like if he replays a Vang, he gets the trigger either way. But this way, like he has to replay the Vang to get the trigger. Whereas like, right, if he had just bounced the Serpents instead of the Vang, then Darksigner could go like Lyra your Finbar and then Vang attack. So yeah, this is just obviously better. Because again, he's got to actually spend the mana to get the Vang effect now, as opposed to getting it for free. The Serpents has no effect either on enter the battlefield or attack. So we see Lyra come down. And I guess he's going for the Bone Blades too. Yeah, makes sense. And he just, yeah, opts to play. It looks like play... Oh, maybe some takebacks here. Yeah, I guess, yeah, okay. Yeah, he just goes for it. I guess he was thinking maybe he could trade in the Laws for an extra shield, which I guess I don't hate. But facing off like one card, I don't think... there's any 2-card, even logosing into stuff. I don't think there's any combinations. Without Fire Mana already unlocked, I don't think there's anything that he can top deck into, really. Like now he's in a spot, like he's got to go for the regen, hope for a Sumo Artichoke and shields, basically. So I think now it does make sense to actually target the Serpents, I think, if you bring back Finbar, because Vang is not guaranteed. The difference this time is like Vang's not guaranteed to out the Finbar, whereas Lyra is. So yeah, I think it does make sense this time around to bounce the Serpents. And like obviously also Lyra obviously doesn't have an attack trigger, but it has a come into play effect trigger, so it's pretty obvious. But it looks like this makes sense too. Just go, yeah, this also just makes more sense. Not really using my brain anymore. You need to present lethal and hope, like either way you're hoping for Sumo Artichoke last shield, so you might as well do the play that gets the most bodies, obviously. So that's what Darksigner does, because he's a good player and doesn't do dumb stuff that I'm just talking out of my butt. Yeah. So if he has the last shield Artichoke, potentially wins. But he would still have to beat a Shield Blast and a blocker. He has to beat a Shield Blast and a blocker. I mean, he's got the out for the blocker in hand with Root Trap, so if he's got the Artichoke, he's got a decent chance. I guess we'll see. What is it? What is it? The third Swift. So, tight game. I think... Yeah, very close game, that one. I think that one play was really interesting earlier on. Obviously, I don't think... Whatever the right play was, I don't think it would have mattered either way, it looks like. Might have even helped Andross the way things played out. It could have, yeah, that could have been the case. And then from Darksigner's side, I think this is another game where you've like played pretty well, I think, for the most part. I don't know if there was anything. Yeah, I think like he kind of just, again, like felt like he kind of missed on the Finbars early this game, and the regens, like they did show up, but I mean he got that Blitz Commando sniped earlier, which was a really big deal because he had he had access to the Steam Tank, but he just didn't have the burst. Like he didn't have the reach that he would have had if he had the Blitz Commandos, which was definitely a huge deal, especially earlier in the game. And I think the only mistake that I would really maybe say is like just not poking for shield with that bad apple right the turn before this. Yeah, but yeah, like this would have been a spot where if he had that blitz, I guess he wouldn't have been able to capitalize on it too well, but at least some of those late game regenerations, like yeah, not having access to it, I think, like getting it sniped by I think that was the big play was like getting this Blitz Commando sniped, because then it made like Darksigner was able to resolve 2 regenerations this game. One when he was basically back against the wall, but like if he had still had access to that Blitz Commando, then maybe he makes that first play with the Steam Tank and then breaks the last shield or something like that, or actually like yeah, he could have potentially broken the last shield with that Steam Tank, and then this Swift Regeneration would have actually won the game if he hadn't got that Blitz Commando sniped. But only seeing 2 red guys getting and losing one of them to discard is just so crucial, especially against this Vang deck, because a lot of the time like your fire guy will survive, right? Because a lot of the decks, like their only way to answer the fire guy is to bounce it with a Rusalka and Finbar, and if you do have the follow-up regeneration, you can just charge the Steam Tank or Blitz and then replay it off of the regeneration. So bounce is only like a temporary out, and you can still recycle and reuse those fire guys. But with Vang in the equation, it changes things a lot, because it actually directly outs those fire creatures. So you need to draw multiples, and just losing one of them to discard, like if he hadn't like got that sniped, like he could have won the you should probably win a game where you resolve 2 generations in this matchup, I feel. In a decent enough position, like a secure enough position, and like this should be a regeneration that kills, but because he never found another fire creature, or because that, I mean, when you play 4, it's hard to expect to see like 3 of them in a game. So losing one of them to discard was just super crucial. Like this could be a lethal regeneration, but instead it's not. And again, on top of that, like I don't think it ended up mattering because of that, but not having the shield broken, I think definitely at least cut off some outs, like just being 1 shield off. But regardless, I think pretty decently well played from both players overall in a very tight match. And those first 2 games are kind of ridiculous, seeing like both players just miss their crucial cards when they were left with like 15 cards in deck. Like no Vangs in game 1, no Finbars or Regens in game 2, which I guess is even more unlikely, to be fair. But yeah, definitely a fun series to watch and lots of interesting moments. I think this was probably a much longer video, but regardless. Thanks as always to everyone for watching these videos. Stay tuned for whatever other videos are left from this tournament, and we'll see you all in the next ones. So thanks again for watching. Bye.